And greetings and welcome to the Steve Deace Show here on CRTV. Don't forget to join us for the audio podcast version later on today, exclusively here at CRTV.com. Share promo code DAYS, please, on social media and with all your friends. And don't forget that we love to know what you think about what we think. Email us, steve@stevedeace.com. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter at Steve Deace Show. Well, it is arguably the most unpopular piece of legislation in modern American political history. So leave it to the Republicans to come up with something even worse. That's right, I'm talking about Obamacare. In case you haven't been here for some of our previous history lessons on just how much Obamacare has devastated the modern Democratic Party, let me reiterate. 900. Write that number down. In fact, it's slightly more than that. Over 900 elections have been lost by Democrats nationwide, over 900, in all three branches of government, both state and federal, since Obamacare's enactment. Over 900. You know, we often debate nowadays, who's got a mandate? What message are the voters sending us on Election Day? Do you think losing 900 elections in the last 4 election cycles, do you think that's a message? Because I kind of do. And I went to public school, and I'm getting that message, okay? Over 900 elections lost by Democrats, and therefore won by Republicans since the enactment of Obamacare. And this began in 2010, and the Republicans told us, hey, give us control of the House of Representatives, where the Constitution says all appropriations begin, and we'll get rid of it. So we did. They didn't. And then they told us, well, they skipped 2012 because they decided to nominate the one guy who came up with this idea before even Obama had it. So we went to 2014. And they told us, hey, you know, we kind of need both houses of Congress where we can now have the real power of the purse. So give us control of the Senate, and we'll get rid of it. So we did. A 9-seat swing in the U.S. Senate in 2014, one of the biggest in the last century. So we did. And then they didn't. And then they told us, hey, listen, yeah, we have that power of the purse thing, but let's be honest. I mean, confrontation's kind of not our jam. So make it easy for us. We kind of rock out to that whole path of least resistance thing. We are the Republicans after all. So give us the presidency too. And then in 2016, after you do, we will repeal it. What was it? Root and branch is what Mitch McConnell said. We'll put it down on a president's desk, and he'll repeal it. So we did. And then last week, again, they didn't. You know, many of us have often wondered in the last year and a half or so, ever since a certain politician's infamous cult coined the phrase cuckservative, what does it really mean? I mean, what's an example of a cuckservative? You know, an absolutely useless Republican who frankly doesn't have the brains or the balls to do what must be done? Well, irony of ironies, we now know, because Donald Trump gave us a demonstration last week. As Sean Spicer, his absolutely loathsome, and I say that with apologies to that word, as his absolutely loathsome White House communications director, White House spokesman said last week, Donald Trump, quote, left it all on the field, unquote, for RhinoCare. And down in flames it went, which wasn't a true repeal. Heck, it wasn't even a true defund of Planned Parenthood. In fact, the Congressional Budget Office said that it was going to be a one-year bait and switch. They would take the money out for a year and then put it right back in. What kind of political party will not defund their own enemies when they have the power to do so? Forget about the life issue, which is hard for me to say because, you know, for me, that issue is a window to the soul. But yet, this is simple politics 101. Planned Parenthood is the #1 sugar daddy of Democratic candidates nationwide, and yet Republicans have the power to defund them, to deny them hundreds of millions of dollars in subsidies, and they don't. And then it didn't take long for Donald Trump to become just another Republican after all. First of all, he gets played out by the courts. You know, those promises on the campaign trail of secure borders and we're going to deport them all. Yeah, the judges got rid of that. Well, and he got rid of some of those on his own too. And then there was the, well, you know what? I'm not going to do what I promised. I'm not going to repeal Obamacare. In fact, I'm going to try and shove a bill down your throat that had a 17% approval rating. 17, guys. 17. All right? That might make for a good winger song, not the approval rating, though, hair metal band, that you're looking for. In fact, you know the last time Congress tried to shove a bill with 17% approval down our throats, you know what it was called? TARP. TARP. You know, the bill that John McCain suspended his campaign for when he was winning post-Labor Day. The one time he was ahead in the polls and he said, you know what, hold my beer, Rhino got this. Let me call a TO, run back to the Senate, shove this legislation bailout that none of y'all want down your throats, and just hand the White House to a Marxist for the next 8 years, because Republicans, right? This is the range that Rhino Care found itself in. 17% approval. 17%, and yet the loathsome Sean Spicer says, for this crap sandwich, Donald Trump, quote, left it all out there on the field. Except he didn't. He had a second win. He got up the next morning after the House Freedom Caucus, our heroes, and frankly, you should call and thank them. You should contact Mark Meadows' office, the president, the leader of the House Freedom Caucus. Contact his office and tell him, hey, thank you for standing in the gap for us. Thank you for standing up for the American people and doing what we asked you to do for the last 8 years, what you promised us you would do for the last 8 years. Thank you for at least trying to do that. And you know what's ironic about this, too, is they probably went too far. In fact, I would make the case that they went further than many of us wanted them to, trying to bend over backwards to make a deal with people that would not negotiate with them. The House Republican leadership, the White House, never negotiated with the Freedom Caucus or conservatives, and if they told you so, they lied to you. Just like they lied to you and said we needed 60 votes in the Senate. We can't repeal this versus via reconciliation. That's a lie as well. These people, they lie a lot. I mean, check it. It's a day that ends in Y. But the House Freedom Caucus, even after giving in way more than we would want them to, still received absolutely nothing. Nothing in return. Well, except monkey poo. Because the next day, your fake tough guy president, ultimate conservative, got on his Twitter account and blasted conservatives for failing to help him betray you. Congratulations, Donald Trump. You pretty much reached peak GOP with that douche-tastic move. And now, here we are. In a pretty crappy place, if I do say so myself. Now, the good news is, Kobayashi Maru scenarios for Republicans or for conservatives in the Republican Party, that's pretty much a state of being. It's why I left. I got tired of it. I can only bow-legged walk so many times. I can only explain away the limp to my children so many times. I had to salvage whatever shred of dignity I had left last year. And finally, when you guys turned this over to an outright clown show, I had to then just walk away. But I know a lot of you remain. Now, there is some good news. The good news is this. Your president, let's just say he's mercurial. Bless his heart. He is prone to radical swings of emotion. He is prone to radical favor with certain staff and disfavor with others. So we could use that to our advantage if it weren't for the bad news. Right now, we are in an environment where it is almost universally impossible to put sincere pressure on this president and to earnestly hold him accountable. Why? Because we're caught in the grips of a false choice. On the left, we have our friends who are out for any form of fake news takedown of Donald Trump, even when he's right. For example, how many of you saw this story last week? Trump showed up in a meeting with Angela Merkel, the German chancellor, with an invoice that he printed off himself for services rendered, some back pay that they owed NATO, and slapped that on her, right? Yeah. Except it never happened. Totally made up. Total fake news, like Trump got rid of the Martin Luther King Jr. statue. And no, he didn't. Just absolute, total, unadulterated fake news. So, of course, we can't, in good conscience, be conservatives and allow such phony memes from the left to go unsubstantiated. We must challenge those things. I agree. However, while we're challenging those things, we also have some of us disposing some fake news as well, calling this Rhino Care, Ryan Care, which it was all those things, but it's not just those things. Remember, Sean Spicer himself said Donald Trump, quote, left it all on the field for that crab sandwich. So while we seek to blame everybody for Trump Care other than Trump himself, he gets off scot-free. And then he has us defending him at the same time against fake news from progressives. So he tiptoes between the raindrops. We never actually get out of him what we want. We're not going to lock her up. We're not going to repeal DACA. We didn't get another Antonin Scalia. We're not going to repeal Obamacare. But yet we're left defending him as his approval rating continues to drop with each unkept promise an example of weak leadership to the American people. Isn't this great? And they said elections have consequences. You bet they do. So we asked a question at the top of the show today. Why vote Republican at all? I posed this question on Twitter over the last couple of days. Here are some of the responses I received. Why even vote Republican? I gave you 4 options. 9% of you said, you know what, I just like taking the banana up the tailpipe, Eddie Murphy. I'm just into that. That's my fetish. That's kind of what gets me going, so don't judge. Okay, to each his own, I suppose. 2% of you openly admitted, I'm just a GOP idolater. I pray to Team GOP at night for my dinner. It's kind of my thing. I like golden calves, and the GOP's mine. All right, props to you for recognizing. 8% of you, this I got a lot of respect for. 8% of you said, listen, Steve, I'm just that dumb. And as long as you own that and admit it, I'm going to give you your propers for that. And then 81% of you said, you know what? I'm asking myself that question right now. Well, someone I know who's been asking themselves that question, even though he has worked as a Republican a lot over the years. He's the former chief of staff to Senator Ted Cruz. He joins us now here on CRTV. Chip Roy, it's good to have you back, my friend. How are you?
Steve, I'm doing great. Thanks for all you do, and thanks for having me on the show.
So, Chip, if you had one of those 4 options to choose, why vote Republican at all? You just have a banana in the tailpipe fetish, you're just that dumb, you're a GOP idolater, or you're asking yourself that question right now. Which one would you choose?
Yeah, it's hard to say. I'd probably choose the last one. What I think is most interesting is if you look at a lot of the polling that's been done since last Friday, you'll find that a good amount of it is pointing to the Freedom Caucus actually potentially saving the GOP from itself. And to the extent, I was joking around with somebody yesterday, that do we actually believe the GOP can be saved? Well, I'm not sure it can. But to the extent that it can be, it's the House Freedom Caucus that's going to lead the charge and actually give it a shot at being saved by standing up on principle. It sure as heck isn't coming from the leadership in Washington.
Chip, I described whatever Rhino Care was that they tried to force down our throats last week. I described its unpopularity as being in the range of TARP. Is that an exaggeration, or do you think that's right on the money?
I think that's right on the money. The polling I've seen has showed it at 17% popularity. And I think that if you see the reaction, there's been essentially a hero's welcome among those like Mark Meadows and others that stood up to fight this bill that was nothing more than Obamacare 2.0 or whatever phrase you want to use, Obamacare Light. Certainly it was a bill that replaced Obamacare, which was built on the back of regulations, subsidies, and Medicaid expansion, and it basically was pushing a bill that was Medicaid expansion, regulations, and subsidies. And so I think that we've seen the response by the American people. They're demanding full repeal, and frankly, they don't get why this is so complicated. Republicans have been campaigning on it for the better part of 7 or 8 years, and they've said they want to repeal it, so they should repeal it. And the American people they don't see how only in Washington can something as simple as full repeal become something that is not.
You have worked on Capitol Hill, including for the number 2 Republican in the Senate, John Cornyn, who's now saying, hey, we're not doing this again. That was our one shot. We promised this for 7 years, and we gave it a shot for about 2 weeks, which was half-assed at that. So that's the only shot you're going to get. So you've been in these meetings. You have witnessed what goes on there at the sausage-making factory, and a lot of us here on CRTV have not. So that's the question we're asking ourselves, Chip. Can you answer it? Is it really just as simple as we're in a political party led by people that just don't share our value system, or is it more complicated than that?
I think it is a mix of people who don't share our values in the sense that they don't want to stand up and make the hard choices. Leadership is hard. okay? Standing up and saying that you believe in free markets and that free markets will drive prices down, and that driving prices down is the key for the majority of Americans getting the health care and the insurance coverage they need. You got to have leaders who are willing to stand on that principle in the face of the easy path, right? The easy path is to say, well, we're going to cover everybody with pre-existing conditions. We're going to take care of everybody regardless of what the market is demanding. If they want to have their cake and eat it too, then they're going to do what we saw, which is half measures that do not actually stand on our principles and foundational principles of limited government and on reducing the cost through market forces, but rather they're going to come up with government solutions so that they can give their handouts, even though they want to claim that they're repealing Obamacare.
Joined by Chip Roy, former Chief of Staff to U.S. Senator Ted Cruz here on CRTV. I mentioned a few minutes ago, Chip, and you know these numbers as well as I do, maybe no piece of legislation has more devastated a political party than Obamacare has Democrats. Since its enactment, Democrats have lost over 900 elections in the last 4 cycles in all 3 branches of government, state and federal. That is a breathtaking number. So for Republicans not to deliver on a 7+ year promise to repeal this, as Mitch McConnell once said, and I quote, root and branch, unquote, for them not to deliver, can you think of a worse betrayal of the American voter by a major political party in recent memory, in our lifetimes, if not ever, Chip?
Well, what is interesting is I think they understand it, right? What I'm hearing, I'm sure you're hearing the same thing, is you're having a lot of huddling going on in Washington right now by both the leadership groups as well as the Freedom Caucus and those that were concerned about the bill. And I think there's a sober reality that they cannot walk away from this promise. Notwithstanding what some people have said about it, they recognize that they've been campaigning on this and they've got to honor that commitment. The question is going to be whether they recognize what honoring that commitment actually means. And this is the really important part, is that as great as the Freedom Caucus was last week in standing up and helping stop this terrible bill, we need to make sure that the Freedom Caucus doesn't get that itch to do what often happens in Washington, which is under the idea of taking half a load. Mm-hmm. We're essentially continuing to give and give and give our loads and never actually get a step back towards freedom and liberty. If they cut a deal that leaves Medicaid expanded, that leaves a subsidy in place, that doesn't undo a guaranteed issue and the cost-driving aspects of the regulations that are in place, but they cut a deal that got a little bit more than the old bill, well, then that's still going to be. So we're going to have to keep them heading in the right direction in order to get where we know we need to go. But to answer your question, I think the party elders are recognizing they have to do this. So my concern is that we, Liberty Lovers, recognize that and that we influence them. Hey, the baseline deal here means actually create an environment where the markets can work. You cannot have your cake and eat it too. Paul Ryan was correct that there's a binary choice, but it wasn't half socialism versus total socialism. We need free market competition or not. You can't have a patchwork quilt, and that's what the leadership has been trying to do. They need to undo that, and it's a binary choice. Trust the market, or you're going to have government solutions, and they don't work.
Finally, Chip, what did we learn about President Trump here? I would say, in terms of a political defeat, this is one of the worst a new president in his first 100 days has probably ever had. And now you're looking at his approval ratings. They continue to go down. He continues to be seen as a weak leader. He's now saying he's going to deal with Democrats who I believe are single payer only. I mean, this is a political party that didn't fix Obamacare the last few years while facing political ruin because they want it to implode. It's doing exactly what they want it to, so they can say this is why we have to have total government-run health care. What did we learn about the President of the United States here, Chip?
I think the jury is still out. And I say that because there still is time to get this right. I think that the president has a lot on his plate coming in and trying to balance, running getting the administration staffed up and getting folks confirmed, getting Gorsuch through. And there is deference here to the House leadership to get a bill done. So I think to the extent that we learned anything, it was that the president, if he's going to honor what he campaigned on, which is draining the swamp and businesses' usual needs to end, then you can't trust the people that have been running it into the ditch. That we've got to get a change in the way we make decisions strategically. And if the president wants to be successful in massive campaign runners, they're going to need to lead and work with the people on the Hill who share those values. If you go back to the same swamp up on the Hill, you're going to get the same result. So I think it's still a little early to make a decision on where the president's going to end up. But I think right now, the next step is going to be very telling. If the president veers off to try to cut a deal with Democrats, he's going to have learned the wrong lesson.
Chip Roy, Texas Public Policy Foundation, former Chief of Staff to Ted Cruz, U.S. Senator from Texas. Thanks for joining us, Chip. We appreciate it.
Steve, I always appreciate it. Thanks for what you do, and for all your listeners and viewers out there. Steve is a warrior for liberty and a really important part of our win last Friday. Now we got to just keep marching forward. So thanks, Steve, for all you do.
Thank you, brother. Same to you, man. Appreciate it. Let's get some reaction from the rest of the team here on the show here on CRTV to both how I opened the program and what we just heard from Chip Roy. Todd, I'll start with you. Your thoughts?
Well, in terms of the jury still being out, as Chip said, Trump, I'm hanging on words like that to see if there is any hope. But the jury in my head and my heart has come back unanimously and said this thing sucks irredeemably. And it's a strange place for me to be in. I don't want to go to that place, and this is not a theological statement. I have hope in that regard. But I have totally cast this system aside because I refuse to play this game. And now I don't know exactly how to pursue it other than to simply tell the truth as you did in your opening monologue. I like the way you said it. We did and they didn't. I've said it for a couple weeks.
We did
now.
everything they asked us to do.
It is a scam. We keep being had in a telemarketer scam. Something must change and must change radically.
At this point, Aaron, you would have gotten a better investment into the Nigerian embassy email than voting Republican. Or am I wrong? Maybe you see it differently.
Yeah, I think I think what needs to happen right now is we need to do something that adults do, and that is draw some distinctions at a national level. Really, for decades, which I don't know why we keep falling for this, but really for decades, the Republican Party is dead. If you're a conservative, it's not accomplished a damn thing. That except for maybe the Second Amendment, that's on your agenda if you call yourself a conservative and you are actually into conserving the ideals and values that have proven themselves to be best for the human condition over the course of history. But I think the distinction needs to be drawn between the national level, which is completely dead. It's a carcass, it's a rotting carcass that's not going anywhere, and what's being done at the local level. Sometimes there are some good things, and I've heard about things at a local level and at a state level before that are doing. They're actually conserving things. If the Republican Party for you is working at a local level, then fine, you can be a part of it. But don't put any of your hope or any expectation of having anything moved forward conservative-wise at a national level.
And I think this is where you have to have a hierarchy of values. I know some of you are like, well, Steve, why aren't you talking about they repealed some of Obama's phony baloney global warming regulations? I appreciate that. I do.
Any Republican would have done that.
I think I agree. Any Republican would have done that, number one. Well, except maybe if Lindsey Graham had gotten the nomination. All the other 15 or 16 candidates, I think, would have.
Is he still a Republican?
Yeah, more so than we are, clearly. We're the rhinos. But the thing here that you have to understand, too, is there is a hierarchy of values. You know, when you've got a bullet wound to the chest and a really bad high ankle sprain, where do your priorities lie? Doctor runs in, triage, calls in the triage. You're bleeding out with a bullet wound to the chest. He's like, nurse, grab the ACE wrap, some ice, and we got to take care of that sprained ankle stat. That's essentially what if today you are cheering the repealing of a few Obama climate garbage, global warming regulations while leaving Obamacare in place, what you're saying is, thanks for wrapping up my sprained ankle. Meanwhile, you didn't touch the bullet wound I have in my chest. This thing is a clear and present danger on multiple fronts, on the life front, on the health front, on the economic front, on the jobs front, on the religious liberty front. I just named
So
five
everywhere.
fronts. Pretty much everywhere. Name me another piece of legislation that's been a threat. In fact, they even think there's provisions within Obamacare where they can say the government can get a hold of your health records to deny you gun ownership, if I recall. So there's 6. This is a 6-front war, is what this monstrosity is. I'm sorry, but the Keystone Pipeline, 50 of those, don't make up for that. Neither does repealing a handful of global warming initiatives. Don't make up for that. This thing is a clear and present danger to our constitutional republic, to our way of life, and not to mention if principle's not your thing. Did you not just watch the last political party who tried to dance with the devil in the pale moonlight get mowed down, man? Like this was the Mekong Delta in the summer of '68. The voters just stood there, flamed with flamethrowers, just shot them down. 900 plus Democrats lost because of this. The Democratic Party was absolutely devastated by the American people for supporting this. What do you think they're going to do to the Republican Party, who lied to them about getting rid of it when they had the chance?
We all have questions.
Who am I?